Hey there and welcome to ZeitgeistOG. I am Fat Man and today I'm coming at you with a little rant. So I recently saw Toy Story 4 and I personally thought it was a poor send-off to the franchise. Well, we don't have 100% assurance that this is for sure going to be the final one because there's always money to be made, but Tom Hanks and a couple of the actors have said that this is going to be their final movie for the Toy Story franchise. Another thing being that most of the actors are already in their mid to early 60s, and considering these movies are taking about 9 to 10 years apiece, I don't really see there being another one. So this seems like it's going to be the final Toy Story movie, and I have a problem with that for a multitude of reasons. So we open on a flashback of Bo Peep being given away, and we find out that she is a central piece to the movie, as well as a sentient spork named Forky. And the whole thing is basically kind of a rekindling of the Woody Bo Peep stuff, as well as keep Forky safe and get him back to Bonnie, who of course is their new kid that they were giving to at the end of Toy Story 3. So here's an issue with this. The Andy arc was essentially perfect. When Toy Story 2 happened, it left the door kind of open. There didn't need to be a sequel. There maybe wasn't going to be a sequel, but there was no loose ends that needed to be wrapped up, and really there wasn't a need for a sequel. So when Toy Story 3 came out, I was as skeptical. Why do we need a 3? The first 2 were great, and it ended kind of great. Why do we need a 3? And that was my thought process going into it. Until I realized 3 was the absolute perfect way to just end this. It was pretty much a damn near perfect trilogy of movies. And why was that so is because while 2 left the door open for maybe there could be, maybe there won't be, 3 kind of like put the nail in the coffin, like, no, this is it. This is done. Where we thought with Toy Story 2 there could be a sequel, Toy Story 3 was like, nah, we don't need anything after this. This is it. Or so we thought. And then Toy Story 4 was announced. Unfortunately, from the get-go, I wasn't too hyped on this, just based off the trailers. It looked like a stock story. And unfortunately, I found that to be true while watching it. Now, here are a couple of my issues with Bo Peep. First of all, was Bo Peep ever really a fleshed out character? She never was. It was mainly just a kind of like thing between her and Woody, or are they or aren't they a thing? And we know they kind of had whatever the equivalent of feelings for each other in the toy world is. But she was never really that fleshed out of a character. She was never really, her only gripe in the main casting was to just be like, oh no, the sheriff. So, while bringing her back was honestly nice to see, it wasn't necessary per se. She was never really that important in the grand scheme of things. Now that also, due to that and Forky being introduced, it minimizes a lot of the screen time anybody else gets. The Potato Heads, which I know Don Rickles passed away, so Mr. Potato Heads, I think all of his lines were archived. I don't think there was anything actually recorded by Don Rickles. And obviously Slinky has a new voice actor, but everybody else's screen time is minimized, with the exception, of course, being that of Buzz and somewhat Jessie. We get a little bit of her in here. So that was my big issue, is the biggest plot point of this movie is a character that in the grand scheme of things was never really that important. Another one of my issues with this thing is it feels like it is pushing the reset button on the franchise. Like I said, 3 tied up everything perfectly. It was the perfect arc of those of us who watched the first movie as a kid and kind of grew up within the same timeline that Andy grew up. And by the time he was going off to college, most of us had graduated high school and were going, well, theoretically going to college. It wasn't a sure thing. But Bonnie, the issue being with Bonnie is it feels like these movies can be limitless at this point because they could keep Bonnie a kid as long as they feel like keeping Bonnie a kid. We've had a 9-year gap to where she's still been a kid. So they're not doing the Andy thing where she's slowly being aged up. They're keeping her relatively the same age outside of her starting, preschool or kindergarten in this movie. And the thing being, there's not that really big connection with the toys that Andy had. Essentially, this movie's about how Bonnie really doesn't give a shit about Woody. So you're already losing that connection between the human and the toy characters. And following Forky around, Forky was interesting, I guess. He had a couple of funny lines, but the trash thing gets old, like, immediately. It was worth maybe a chuckle the first time, and immediately it's old. So even he's not that interesting of a character. And finally, we get to my biggest issue with this movie, is the emotional moments. They were emotional. They really, really were. But if you take out the end of the movie where Woody bids farewell to everybody and joins Bo Peep in the Rogue Toys thing, or the lost toys, or whatever you want to call it. If you take that away and Woody's realization that maybe you don't always need to have a kid, the movie's essentially empty. There's nothing really driving it. None of the characters are fleshed out. None of the new characters are that interesting. The characters we like aren't really in it that much. So besides that, it's kind of pointless in the grand scheme of things, or at least I felt so. Now, if you would have taken those two big emotional moments and incorporated them into Toy Story 3, which I think was doable, I feel like that would have perfectly encapsulated this franchise and really just sent it off on the strongest note possible. With Toy Story 4, we have a movie that's not really trying that hard, that's not really doing anything new, that's not treading on any kind of different territory, but it has that big money moment of Woody and Buzz finally parting ways, which was sad as hell, but that's really it. That is the only definitive character moment in this movie. And Buzz and Woody's relationship has always been one of the better things in these movies. So that was a great moment. And it really hits you in the heartstrings, especially if you've been watching these movies the first one came out in 94, 95. If you've been watching these movies that long, that moment is going to resonate with you. But it was just so misplaced in a movie that ultimately was pointless, and it tarnishes a trilogy that was otherwise pretty damn near perfect in my opinion. But that was my gripes with Toy Story 4. What did you think of it? Do you think it added anything to the franchise? Do you think it was necessary? And what do you think going forward is the plan for this? Is this really the last one? Are they just going to milk it? Because it feels like they're leaving the door open to do as many sequels as they possibly want or need to do. For ZeitgeistOG, I am Fat Man, and that was a Fat Dork's opinion on an animated movie targeted at 6-year-olds. We'll catch you next time.